crouch will be the next one that we take a look at. For the crouch on the player, it's basically the idea behind it would be the user pushes a button, the character will go into a crouch animation, which is about half the size, and then if you push the button again, the player would go back up. We could also have a second option that if you push the button and hold, as long as you hold it, he stays. If you let go of it, he goes back up. Alright, so we have two different ways we could do that. The support for it should be pretty easy, so we'll go ahead and have both of them. The catch that we're going to run into here, though, is that the character controller right here, character controller when you crouch down doesn't change. So we're going to need to make sure we actually get access to it, and then adjust its height, adjust its center Y. Alright, so inside of the crouch, let's go ahead and start off like we've done with the other ones. We'll do a check to see whether or not we can actually crouch. So we'll say can crouch. And the can crouch should be, yeah, it's called can crouch. You can also double check over here, and you should find can crouch right here. Right below this one, there's also one called can crouch hold key down. So this one, the idea, of course, would be that if we are going to crouch, we have the one option that we have to push and hold the key. Otherwise, it's a single press, and then when you push again, he goes back up. So let's go ahead and do a check for this one. We'll say can crouch hold key down. So if this is actually true, then what we're going to do is actually push and hold a button. So in order to push and hold a button, we can just say if, and then we're going to do the input.getButton. Now remember, the get button by itself means that it's going to be returning true as long as the button is held down. All right. So get button, and the name for our button is actually called crouch. If you go into your player, if you go to the edit and project settings and input, you'll notice that the player has one called crouch. The crouch option for the button is going to be C. Joystick button is 4. You can change those up if you want to have them as different ones. Alright. So, back into here. If we actually push and hold this down, then let's go ahead and just do a quick check. Let's go ahead and call up its animation. The animation for this one, we're going to assume it was probably like a ANI, we'll say animation crouch idle, I believe. Let's double check here. Animation crouch idle. Alright, so we have animation.ani crouch idle, and for this one we want to do the name option for it as well. Animation, make sure that's actually set right. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. We have the animation.crossfade, and then it will be inside parentheses. There we go. Okay, so we have the animation crossfade, and then what we're checking for is the animation crouch idle name. Alright, so if we save this, we jump into Unity here. And when we play it, what we should be able to do is push and hold C. And if you notice, player goes down, the character controller here stays the same height. When you let go of the button, the player goes back up. One of the catches here is that when I hold C down, if I move forward, he jumps out of his crouch state. And this may not be really the ideal solution at the moment, because when you go crouch, you may want to just rotate. You may not want to actually move the player. So we'll adjust those settings here in a little bit. So this works. You can push a button, you get the animation to play. Let's take this a little bit further, though. Instead of having the animation play here and doing the animation play twice throughout these calls, if we have the two different ways available, let's just do a simple toggle here. We'll just turn on is crouching. So is crouching, and is crouching, let's double check where that one was at. And I may have to do here we go. So is crouching. So if the player is crouching is true, then we want to play the animation. However, if the player lets go of the button, then we'll just say else is crouching equals false. Alright. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, if we do those two, let's say, for instance, we want to go ahead and fill out the is crouching. So let's go ahead and just go down here and say if is crouching is true. And if the is crouching is true, and we don't want, so we're inside of here, we want to play the animation. So we'll say the animation.crossfade, and we want to do that crouch idle again. Alright. So we want to do more than just the animation, though. If you remember, the player was moving, so we don't want the player to move. How do we keep the player from moving, or how do we give the player extra speed? For instance, if you remember when we were doing the sprint, what was the word we were using? So if we go inside of here, what was that word? It was move speed. So we know that the move speed actually controls the speed of the player. Well, that means that if I'm in here, I can actually say move speed equals, now we can say 0, but let's double check. I think there was a speed for idle. We have speed, oh, there we go, speed crouch. Alright, it's set to 0, but this is something on the design side of the tool. You may actually want it to move slow, so we'll go ahead and make sure that we just set it to a word, that way we can change it inside the inspector. Alright, so we have move speed equals speed crouch, which is 0. If I was to save this, we'll go back in here real quick. Alright, so if I move my player around, if I push C, notice that he doesn't actually move from that spot. I'm pushing the forward, but he's not going to move from it. Now, I can rotate, which is good. I can actually rotate him around, but he's going to stay in that one spot when you hold it. Alright. So, we have the player locked into the crouching. He's not going to be moving around on us. The other thing that we want to do is actually adjust that controller height. Remember, it didn't actually move down when we crouch, so we want to make sure it moves down with us. So let's go ahead and set up the actual, let's go ahead and get access to the character controller's height and the center Y. We want to adjust those two elements on it. Alright, so we'll go ahead and just get our character controller here. And we'll get the height. The height is going to equal. We should have some defined values up here. Let's find those. Character controller, height, default, and center. We're looking for character controller. There we go. We have our temp variables. These are going to be the ones that adjust the box. Currently it's the 1.4, and we're going to adjust it to 1. The Y is on 0.7. We're adjusting it to 0.5. So we'll say the height is going to be equal to the character controller height here, and the character controller, and this is going to be center. So remember, when you're trying to get the right words, it's character controller, center, Y. So when you're doing the dot notation, you have center, and then you do the dot notation again, you get Y, and that's going to equal, what was ours called up here? And character controller center Y. Alright, so getting both of those, it's going to allow us to actually have the character controller to be adjusted. We'll save this and give it a quick test. Right, so when I push C to crouch, it goes down, which is right, but when I let go of it, it doesn't go back up. So that's one of the things that we'll have to make another check for, is that when it gets, when the button goes up, then we just reset the values. Alright, so let's do one more quick check. Let's go ahead and make sure that we do a can jump equals false. We want to just make sure that even in a crouch state that the regular can jump isn't available. Alright, so let's go ahead and add one last part. We'll just say a message. And we'll say it's the animation state of crouch. Alright. So this is going to allow the player to crouch, and then when it goes to false, the player goes back up into an idle state. Okay, so let's go ahead and do another one here. If we want to have it where the button push is up, that lets us know that we can actually get out of the crouch state and reset the character controller box. So let's go ahead and just make another call here. We'll say if input.getButton, and we'll say up. That way, when we let go of the button, so we'll say crouch. Alright. So when we let go of the button, we just want to set something to true or to false. We'll go ahead and set a true value here. Let's find where we can use reset character controller. This will be a good one. So inside of here, we're just going to say that if the button goes up, then we're going to say reset character controller actually equals true. And then let's just do a quick check on this one. So if reset character controller is true, then let's go ahead and reset the values inside of here. First one we'll just do is going to be reset character controller is going to equals false. That way it just runs it through one time. Alright. The next thing that we want to do, let's go ahead and just do the same ones that we had up here. The character controller height. And character controller center Y. Alright, so we have those two. Now what we want to do is take them back to the default value that we had before. What we did have up here was a controller height default and a controller center Y default. Let's go ahead and take those. Now, when it comes to the number, notice there's no number right here, and this is one of those parts where you want to kind of investigate what's happening. If I see no numbers there, it means it's potentially being defined somewhere else. So let me copy these and paste them into it. Alright, so where are these being defined? Now if you're just kind of thinking about where something would be initialized first, you may find it in the awake, or you may find it in the start. So let's go up to our awake and to our start here. Alright, in the awake we don't have anything called that. In the start, let's see, we actually do have our controller default center and height. Now notice these are actually set to the beginning, the first default number that we have, which means that what it's recording is the 1.4 and it's recording the 0.7. Alright. Now the good thing about using it this way is that for the user on this side, they're not even aware that this is even being recorded, but what we're doing is making sure that whatever number they put, because your character may be 3 times taller or shorter, they may go from a tall to a really small crouching position, so the radius or even the height might be adjusted. Those are just simply the easiest way to store it without having to worry about the number itself. Now, if we have those, let's go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and play on this one. Alright, now, before you crouch, just kind of think about what's going to happen. I'm going to push C, he's going to go down. Now, if I let go of it, he goes back up. Alright, now, say for instance I run him around, and I crouch, and I start to move him around. He seems to work pretty well, which is a good thing. The only thing that I would be a little bit concerned on is that if he happens to fall out, say for instance he crouches, he's on something that allows him to crouch a little too far into the geometry, he may wind up by accident falling in. So let's do just a little bit of a precautionary state for it. On the reset character controller, let's actually turn the gravity. Let's see. Let's make a variable. We'll just call this temp gravity, and we'll actually make this equal to our gravity that we currently have. And then let's set gravity to 0. So we're setting the current gravity to 0 just so that in case while he's crouching, maybe he's on a piece of geometry that allows him to kind of cut through a little bit. If it was, there's a good chance that when you come back up out of it for that character controller box, it would actually fall down instead of popping back up. So if we set gravity to 0, the player won't move, he won't fall down while he's doing that crouch. And then once we have the character controller options pushed back up, then we can reset the gravity. So say gravity re-equals the temp gravity it started with. So this is just a simple way, but an effective way to make sure he doesn't fall through the floor when he goes into that crouch and then comes back out of that crouch state. Alright, so we now have our reset character controller. We have it set up so that if the can crouch hold key down is true, then you can push a button to crouch. If it's not, then it actually turns this off. If the button goes up, this becomes true, which resets this to true, and it runs through once. Alright, so we have the basic setup for that one. Now what if this is false? So what if this part right here is false? That means that none of this is actually going to be used. So if we wanted to do it where we push the button once, and he crouches, and then we push the button again, and he comes out of the crouch. Let's go ahead and define that. So we'll say if, and this part of it, actually, let's not even do an if, we'll do just a if-else right here. So we'll say else, and on the else, we want to check for a button push. So we'll say input get button down. Remember, the get button down only does it once, so when you push it, it just returns true. And again, we're still going to use the same button. It's going to be crouch. So if we're actually pushing the button down, then we just want to say is crouching equal to not is crouching. So what does this do? Remember, this is basically saying if this is true, it's false. And it's going to come in here and say that if it's false, it's true. So it's just simply a toggle to go back and forth between true and false. Alright, and that's actually all we have to do for that one. If we go in here and click on our player, and let's turn off the can crouch from key. So what we should be able to do is single push. So notice all I had to do is push it once. If I push it again, he comes out of it. So now we have a way to toggle it by single press, and we have the other option, which is allows you to hold it, and when you let go, he goes back up. Alright. That actually sets us up pretty good for our crouching states. Gives us 2 ways to actually crouch, and then we have a nice safety check here so the player doesn't fall through the floor when the character controller starts to go back up. And the last thing that we want to do is comment this in. Alright, so the statements here, I've just placed these in. So you may want to pause and then write those in. Alright, so that's basics for our crouch state. This allows us to crouch down. Something that we don't have in here though is, there's a crouch, but then there's also a crawl. You can actually take it so that he goes down to a crouch state, and then if you push another button, maybe he goes from a crouch to a crawl state, and then allows you to crawl around on the ground, so in case he has to go through a little tunnel or something, then you would be able to do that with it. Alright, so be sure to save and test it out one more time, make sure it works. There we go. So we have our crouch working pretty good. Next thing that we'll work on is going to be the jump from the crouch.